"From now on, Dad, you'll have to get used to it. They'll take better care of you here than I can." That was the last thing Henry said to me, right before he pulled the iron gate of the nursing home shut. I still remember that sound. Sharp, cold, like the click of a latch sentencing me to the rest of my life. I stood frozen, watching through the frosted glass, seeing his back disappear through the main gate, his shoulders straight, the confident posture of someone who just got exactly what they wanted. I didn't feel anger. I felt something else, something deeper than sadness, a revelation, because it was in that exact moment of abandonment that I realized I still had one right left that he couldn't take from me. The right to decide how this story would end. On my terms. And so I did. That very same day, I changed my will completely. My name is Arthur Miller. I'm 74 years old, and I used to own a large logistics company in Cleveland. I spent half my life on highways, in contracts, managing cargo, and chasing the dream of building something from nothing. My wife, Isabel, passed away 10 years ago, and since then, I've lived alone in a huge old house where only the wind and the smell of oak keep me company. Henry, my only son, was sent to study abroad with money it took me a lifetime of work to save. I always thought he was the brightest part of my life, but it turned out that light was actually the fire that would burn everything down. That morning, the sky was clear. I was making coffee when he called, his voice all smooth and sweet. "Dad, I'm stopping by today. We're going to visit a place for just a little while. You're going to like it." I believed him. I had no reason not to. I put on a clean shirt, combed my hair carefully, and even brought my small prayer book, thinking we were going somewhere nice to get breakfast, to talk like in the old days. But his car didn't turn toward our usual diner. Instead, it stopped in front of a white-painted iron gate with a large sign, "Oakwood Senior Living." I smiled a little, thinking it was a joke. "What are we doing here, son?" Henry didn't look at me, just opened his car door. "You need to rest, Dad. They have nurses here, doctors. The house is being renovated. There's so much dust." I listened to him and I felt a chill run right through me. Every one of his words, as light as the wind, but heavier than a rock. When the staff came to help me out, I still tried to stay calm. Inside the home, the smell of disinfectant and a desolate breeze from the hallway hung over everything. Several elderly residents were sitting silently by the windows, with eyes that had seen it all, but with a sadness that had dried up long ago. They took me to a small room, a metal bed, an old wooden wardrobe, and a window that looked out onto a yard full of dry leaves. Henry left the suitcase on the table and sighed as if he'd just lifted a great weight off his shoulders. "Stay here for a while, Dad. When I finish sorting things out with the company, I'll come get you." I looked him straight in the eye. "You're not coming back, are you?" He was silent for a few seconds. Then he looked away and closed the door. As the sound of his footsteps faded, I sat on the bed and pulled an envelope from my shirt pocket, a copy of the old power of attorney I had secretly made a long time ago. I smiled, just slightly. "It's all right, son," I whispered. "If you bury me here today, then I'll bury your future too." Saturday morning, Cleveland woke up to a bright sun. The light filtered through the thin curtains of my room, drawing streaks on the cold tile floor. I'd gotten up early and put on the old gray suit that Isabel had bought me for our 30th wedding anniversary. It was worn at the cuffs, but I wanted to look sharp on this special day, the day I would take back the power to decide my own life. The nurse on duty smiled at me. "Mr. Miller, heading out again? Is someone picking you up today?" I answered briefly. "Yes, an old friend. And I have something I've needed to do for a long time." She nodded, asking no more questions. Everyone here understood that each resident has a little secret they live for. Mr. Roberts's car was parked in front of the entrance. He got out, short and slow, but with a steady walk, carrying a brown leather briefcase. "Right on time, as always," he said, his voice deep and soft. "Are you ready, Arthur?" I smiled. "I've never been more ready." We drove to the notary's office downtown. On the way, Mr. Roberts explained every detail carefully. "After today, the new will shall be sealed and filed in 3 different locations, 1 copy at the bank, 1 with me, and 1 sent directly to the Oakwood Foundation. Your son won't be able to contest it unless you personally request it, and that, I know, will never happen." I nodded, feeling a strange lightness in my heart. The notary's office was in an old building with dark polished wood window frames. The air smelled of paper, ink, and bitter coffee. The young notary stood up when he saw us and shook our hands respectfully. "Mr. Miller, it's an honor to serve you. Mr. Roberts has already briefed me. The documents are ready." I opened the file and slowly read every line. When I got to the end, my eyes stopped on the sentence I had asked Mr. Roberts to add the night before. I state for the record that my son, Henry Miller, has not been disinherited for a lack of love, but for a lack of respect. I signed, each stroke of the pen slow and steady. When I put the pen down, I could hear my heart beating, as clear as a gavel sealing a sentence. Mr. Roberts collected the documents, stamped them carefully, and handed me a copy. "It's done. Arthur, from now on, no one can touch what you've built. And I'll tell you the truth. This isn't just a will. It's a statement." I looked at him, a warmth in my eyes. "Thank you, Roberts. You've just given me back something I thought I'd lost. My honor." As we left the building, the afternoon sun was slanting, casting shadows through the rows of leafy trees. I walked slowly, feeling every breath come a little easier. On the way back, I said quietly, not knowing if it was for Mr. Roberts or for myself, "All right, Isabel. You can rest in peace now. Our boy chose his path, and I've chosen mine." When the car turned onto the quiet street and the wind brought the smell of new wood and dried roses, I smiled faintly. I knew the storm wasn't over. The time would come when Henry would find out. But this time, I wouldn't be the one who was shaking. 3 days after signing the new will, I returned to my usual routine at Oakwood Senior Living. Everyone ate at their scheduled times, slept at their scheduled times, and talked about small things like the weather or lunch or what was on TV that night. But for me, the world had changed. I no longer felt abandoned. I was just someone waiting for a storm, and I knew for a fact it was coming. That morning, while I was sitting in the courtyard with Mrs. Davis, the young nurse ran up. "Mr. Miller, someone is asking for you at the front desk. A man, well-dressed." I was a little surprised. For a moment my heart stopped, but then I knew immediately. No need to guess, it's my son. I stood up, adjusted my jacket, and grabbed my old wooden cane, the one I never really needed, but kept out of habit. When I got to the entrance, I saw Henry standing there. He was wearing a dark suit, holding his phone in his hand and avoiding my gaze. Behind him, his black SUV was waiting with the engine running. "You came to visit?" I asked, my voice calm. "How are you looking?" "Better than I expected," he said with a forced smile. "I was just passing by. Had something to do nearby. Something at the bank, wasn't it?" I looked him straight in the eye. Henry blinked, visibly surprised. "You knew?" "Of course. News travels faster than you think. What else brought you here in such a hurry besides the bank calling to confirm the account holder's signature?" He swallowed, and his look turned sharp and cold. "I just wanted to make sure you were okay. After all, you're here, for your own good." I managed a slow smile. "How considerate of you. But let me clear something up. If I'm here, it's by my choice, not yours. And thanks to you, I had time to do the most important thing of my life." "What are you talking about?" He frowned. "You'll find out soon enough." He stared at me for a moment, then he smiled with disdain. "Still the same, always so mysterious. You know what? If you need anything, I can give you some cash for expenses." That line was like a dull knife. "Just worry about yourself. It's not necessary. I have plenty to leave behind, and it's not just money." A gust of wind passed, bringing the scent of jasmine from the fence. Henry looked around, seeming confused. Maybe he expected to find a trembling, begging old man, not the calm, clear-eyed man I was at that moment. "Well, I have to go," he said, turning around. "Take care. I'll be back when I have time," I replied softly. "Don't worry. Next time, maybe I'll be the one visiting you. But not here." He stopped for half a second, in disbelief, and then left. I watched the black SUV disappear among the trees. Through the rearview mirror, I saw him glance back at me, with an expression of annoyance. Maybe the instinct of someone who has made a mistake was just starting to wake up. In the afternoon, when I returned to my room, the landline rang. It was Mr. Roberts's voice, smooth. "The news is out, Arthur. The bank has been notified of the change in the will. Henry will surely react. But stay calm. We're just starting the first chapter of the game." I looked out the window. The evening sun was reflecting my face in the glass. "It's not a game, Roberts," I said slowly. "It's a lesson my son will never forget." The next day, the nursing home was unusually noisy. Nothing serious, just that someone had sent a bouquet of white orchids with a printed card bearing the name Henry Miller. The nurse brought it to my room, smiling. "Your son misses you, Mr. Miller." I looked at the bouquet. Its scent was soft but as cold as an apology that doesn't need words. I just replied quietly, "Put it by the window, please. The flowers are nice, but I don't want them near the bed. I'm afraid they'll wilt soon." Outside, the sky was clouding over again. I poured myself some tea, and as I took a sip, I read the newspaper, though my mind was elsewhere. When a guilty person sends flowers, it's because they're starting to get scared. At noon, the landline rang. It was Mr. Roberts, as I expected. "Arthur, your son just came to my office. He brought his own lawyer, wanted to see the old will." I smiled slightly. "And did you show it to him?" "Of course not. I only gave them a public copy without any clauses about the control of assets. They were furious, but they couldn't do anything. He asked me directly if you had changed the will. I just told him, if he did, it is his full right as Arthur Miller." I was quiet for a moment, then replied, "Good. Let him guess. Sometimes the fear of the unknown costs people more sleep than the truth itself." In the afternoon, Mrs. Davis came back to my room, bringing some cookies and her mischievous smile. Guess who just stopped by the home, with a gold watch, walked in and spoke to the administrator for over half an hour. Then he left, his face pale as a ghost. "Me?" I smiled, but inside I felt a weight. He came to investigate his own father. He no longer thinks I'm just a harmless old man. Mrs. Davis propped her chin on her hand, half joking, half serious. "Maybe he's worried you'll escape. The rain won't let him lose his assets any more than lose his soul." I looked out at the garden, where the rain had stopped. The ground was shining, reflecting the overcast sky. I said softly, as if to myself, "He'll soon realize that there are assets far greater than money, and that once they're lost, they can't be bought back." That evening, the administrator handed me an envelope. "Someone asked me to give this to you in person," she said, outside Henry's familiar handwriting. "I want you to come home. Can we talk again?" I read it, without anger or joy. I simply sat down, opened the drawer, took out the photo of my wife, Isabel, and put the letter next to it. "See, Isabel?" I said quietly. "He's starting to panic, but this time, I'm not going to flinch." I took a piece of paper and wrote a reply with each letter clear. "Son, I'm glad you want to talk, but I no longer have a home other than this place. The old house is yours now. I'll let you decide about it. As for me, I have already decided. For good." I folded the letter, sealed it carefully, and asked the nurse to send it back. When I was done, I looked out the steamy window. A lightning flash lit up the horizon far away, followed by the slow, muffled sound of thunder. I knew that from the moment Henry read this letter, the real storm had begun. 2 days later, it seemed like all of Cleveland's rain for the month had been concentrated into one afternoon. Thunder and lightning cracked across the sky, and the wind whipped the trees in the courtyard. I was halfway through a page in my book when the door flew open. The nurse came in, flustered. "Mr. Miller, your son, he's here. He wouldn't wait. He says he has to see you right now." I gently closed the book, placed it on the table, and stood up calmly. In the hallway, the sound of heavy shoes echoed on the wet floor. When I came out, Henry was already there, his shirt soaked from the rain, his hair disheveled, his face pale but with a fiery look in his eyes. "Dad," he said, his voice trembling with anger, "what have you done?" I tilted my head, calm. "Come in so you don't get wetter. We don't need to shout in front of everyone." He came in, dripping on the floor, and slammed the door. "I just left the bank. They tell me the investment accounts and the company's shares have been temporarily frozen, pending confirmation from you," I replied slowly. "That's right. From the legal owner. Is there something wrong with that? You're destroying everything, he shouted. I'm the one who runs things, who maintains the company. And you're just... Stop, I interrupted him with a look so cold it made him pause. Before you say something you'll regret, remember. If it weren't for me, you'd have no company to run. Henry clenched his fists. His nails dug into his skin. You changed the will, didn't you? I looked him straight in the eye. Yes, and this time, I thought about it very carefully. I haven't died, but you killed the part of me that once trusted you. He laughed bitterly, a laugh mixed with venom. Are you doing this for revenge? An old man in a nursing home thinks he can take on his own son? I answered, my voice low but firm. No, Arthur Miller doesn't get revenge on anyone. He just gives a final lesson to someone who forgot the meaning of respect. And you'll learn it the same way you treated me. He stepped closer, pointing his finger at me. I won't let you ruin my life. Do you forget you still carry the Miller name? If you disgrace me, you disgrace yourself. I smiled faintly. No, Henry, I'm just cleaning the Miller name of the stain that you left on it. For a moment, only the sound of the rain falling outside the window could be heard. He took a deep breath and threw his umbrella on the table. What do you want? Money? Or do you want me to kneel and beg for forgiveness? I just want you to understand that there are things that, once lost, no amount of money can get back. Henry fell silent. The anger in his eyes was like a flame fighting the wind. It couldn't burst out, but it wouldn't die either. He clutched the letter in his hand, his knuckles white, and then said through gritted teeth, What game are you playing? I gave you a good place to live. I gave you everything you needed, and still, you turn your back on me to listen to a couple of old lawyers. I stood in front of him, as calm as if I were listening to a client complain about a small error in a contract. You're wrong, Henry. I didn't turn my back on you. You were the one who abandoned me, the very instant you closed the gate of this home. He let out a dry laugh, trying to maintain his posture, but his gaze was already wavering. They're using you. I just wanted you to be at peace, so no one could cheat you. Cheat me? I asked quietly, taking a step toward him, my eyes locked on his. You say they're cheating me, but you forget who signed that stupid power of attorney years ago. It was me, and the one who gave me that paper to sign was you. The air felt as heavy as lead. Outside, the rain hammered the tin roof of the home. The nurse looked in through the window. She saw us facing each other and just closed the door quietly. Henry turned, uncomfortable, his voice harsh. I only did it to protect the assets, don't you understand? You don't know how they can steal a company these days with a simple electronic signature. I smiled bitterly. You talk as if you were a knight protecting me, but in reality, you were only protecting yourself and your wallet. This time, he couldn't answer. The anger tied a knot in his throat. He finally exhaled, trying to regain his composure. You're old. You don't understand. I'm the one who knows what's best for everyone. Anyway, your will is worthless if you're not in your right mind. I stared at him, my voice serene. Then try it, son. Call the doctors, the court, the whole world if you want. But you'll have to look me in the eye and admit that the saner one of the two isn't you. Henry froze. Sweat beaded on his forehead despite the cold. He took half a step back, clinging to his phone as if looking for an escape. I'm going to prove you're wrong, he said, his voice choked. You'll regret this. I already have my regrets, Henry, but not for the reasons you think. He turned and left quickly. The black SUV started, pulling away and leaving a trail of splashed water. I stood watching until the sound of the engine disappeared, and only then did I go back inside. Mrs. Davis was waiting for me in the hallway, her wool scarf half knitted in her hands. She asked quietly, Was that him again? I nodded. Yes, and he just proved what I needed, that he's starting to lose control. She smiled faintly, her eyes crinkling. Then you've already won. The wise man just has to wait for the greedy man to burn himself out. I looked outside. The rain was still falling. Inside me, the anger had cooled completely, leaving only a sense of relief, cold but clear. The game had reached its final round. After that confrontation, the atmosphere at Oakwood Senior Living changed noticeably. I continued with my life as usual, drinking my tea, reading the newspaper, and walking in the garden with Mrs. Davis. But inside, I knew it was time to sow the first seed of my plan to restore justice. 3 days passed, and Henry didn't call. I knew he was busy trying to find a solution. He'd probably gone to the bank, consulted his lawyers, looking for some loophole in the new will. But what he didn't know was that every move he made was within Mr. Roberts's calculations. That morning, I received a small package in the mail with a return address that simply said, Roberts and Associates. Inside was an envelope sealed with red wax and a handwritten note. The plan is ready. As soon as you give your consent, I will activate the next phase. I opened the envelope. Inside was a copy of the anonymous donation contract that Roberts and I had discussed previously. All my assets, from the company to the real estate, would be gradually transferred to the charitable Oakwood Foundation, but it wouldn't be made public until the day of my death. On paper, I would only be listed as an honorary sponsor with no commercial value that Henry could sue for. In other words, I still owned everything, but no one could touch it. But in the afternoon, I called Roberts. Are you sure he can't reverse any of this? I asked. I'm not sure, Arthur, he replied calmly. But I know your son, and I know he's an arrogant man. And arrogant men, when they feel offended, reveal their own weaknesses. Let's let him attack first. I smiled slowly. You're still right, just like in the old days. In business, I've defeated many rivals simply by letting them believe they were winning. At sunset, I went out to the courtyard with Mrs. Davis. She asked, What are you hiding? I've seen you smiling to yourself since yesterday. I looked off into the distance, where the sun was setting over the red rooftops of the city, and I replied softly, I'm not hiding anything. I'm just waiting. I've just put a mirror in front of my son. Now I just have to wait for him to see his own true face in it. She laughed and then said quietly, You're not like the other old folks here, Arthur. They just want peace, but you're still writing your own story. That night, I opened the window and looked out at the twinkling city lights. In my shirt pocket, I kept the paper with the signature Arthur Miller, still fresh. Each signature, for me, was like an engraving in stone, serene, durable, and unerasable. A light, early-season rain was falling outside. I listened to that sound with a strange sense of peace. I knew that somewhere in the city Henry was awake, obsessed with one question. What has my father done, and why is everything starting to slip through my fingers? I gently closed the window and turned off the light. In the darkness, I said softly, just to myself, Son, in this game, I don't need to win. I just need you to learn what it's like to lose. One Monday morning, as I was reading the newspaper in the courtyard, I heard insistent knocking at the door. The administrator came in with an uncomfortable expression. Mr. Miller, there are 2 men who want to see you. They say they're lawyers representing your son. I folded the newspaper and smiled faintly. Send them in. 2 men entered, black suits, leather briefcases, and voices as cold as metal. The taller one spoke first. We're from the firm Smith & Associates. Your son, Mr. Henry Miller, has authorized us to manage some matters related to your legal capacity and your legal health status. My legal health status? I raised an eyebrow. Correct. It is suspected that you are acting under the influence of third parties in drafting your new will. I looked him straight in the eye with a dismissive smile. Are you saying I've lost my mind? He didn't answer. He just opened his briefcase and put a thick stack of papers on the table. We will be petitioning a court to order an evaluation. If the results indicate that you do not have the capacity to make decisions, the recent will be invalidated. I leaned back in my chair and sighed softly, as if they were telling me something I'd known for a long time. All right, I said calmly, but let it be clear, I still remember every figure from the accounting ledgers from 20 years ago. And I also remember very well who skimmed a portion of the company's profits in 2018. His face paled for a moment. You're insinuating, I'm just refreshing my memory. Now, if you'll excuse me, I need my nap. They left, trying to maintain an appearance of courtesy, but I could clearly see the annoyance in their eyes. As soon as the door closed, I laughed quietly. Henry had made his move, just as Roberts had predicted. In the afternoon, I called Roberts and told him everything. On the other end of the line, he burst out laughing. So the boy fell into the trap. We'll do the opposite. You will be the one to request the evaluation, with an independent psychologist and a notary as witnesses. I've already made the arrangements. I just need you to sign the authorization, and everything will be made public and legal, I replied quietly. Do it. If he wants to prove his father has lost his mind, then I'll show the world who's really lost control. 3 days later, the evaluation team arrived. They asked me hundreds of questions: my date of birth, the founding date of the company, my mother's name, my wife's name, the revenue from 1998. I answered fluently, even citing clauses from old contracts. The doctor smiled. Your memory is better than many people in their 40s. When they left, I went out to the porch and looked at the bright Cleveland sky. I knew the results of the evaluation would soon be in Henry's hands, and he wouldn't be able to believe it. At night, Roberts called again. Perfect, Arthur. The certificate attesting to your full legal capacity has been officially published. From now on, anyone who questions it will have to face a tribunal. I said quietly, Good. Now it's his turn to expose himself. I hung up the phone and sat in silence. Out there, in the mansion I built myself, Henry was probably throwing things, shouting about losing a game where he didn't even understand the rules. I closed my eyes gently, feeling a deep peace. The game had changed, and this time, I was the one moving the pieces. The news about the evaluation results spread faster than I imagined. Just 2 days later, Roberts called me while I was having my morning coffee with Mrs. Davis. He was laughing on the phone, his voice unable to hide his satisfaction. The local press has published the certificate of your legal capacity. The name Arthur Miller is back in the headlines, but this time not for his business, but for his remarkable intellect at 74. I laughed. So I'm famous again? Not only that, I heard Henry called 2 banks to ask how to block your accounts, but they refused, because now all your documents are legally sealed. He no longer has any excuse to take control. I hung up the phone, feeling as light as if I had just dropped a rock I'd been carrying for years. Mrs. Davis looked at me with a knowing gaze. Have you won? Not entirely, I replied, but he started to get scared, and scared people tend to act in the stupidest ways. In the afternoon, just as I sensed he would, Henry showed up. This time, no luxury car, no gold watch. He was wearing a simple shirt, his hair was a mess, and he had dark circles under his eyes as if he hadn't slept in nights. Dad, he said as he entered my room, we need to talk. I gestured for him to sit. The atmosphere in the room was as heavy as stone. He looked around, seeming surprised to see the new pictures on the wall and the small potted plant Mrs. Davis had just brought in. Looks like you're living pretty well, huh? Much better since the day I stopped having to explain what I do to anyone. Henry lowered his head, his voice slower. Dad, I know I made a mistake, but I did it to protect the family. I was worried they were using you. I just didn't want to lose what you worked so hard to build. You didn't want to lose it, but you chose to steal it, I replied calmly. You were afraid of losing the company, but you weren't afraid of losing me? He fell silent. I saw his shoulders tremble. That arrogant, confident posture of someone who thought they had it all now shrunk like a scolded child. For a moment, I almost saw the image of that little boy again, sitting next to me, asking me how to do his sums, his eyes full of trust. I said quietly, Son, there are things that, when lost, can't be bought with money. I used to think I just needed to be successful, but now I understand that the most terrifying thing is to raise an intelligent person without teaching them how to be human. Henry stood up, his eyes red. What do you want me to do to fix my mistake? Teet, it's not about what I want, I replied. It's about you wanting to redeem yourself. But remember, redemption isn't achieved with words, but with actions. He nodded and left in silence. When the door closed, Mrs. Davis came in from outside with a hot cup of tea. Looks like you managed to touch his heart, she said. I watched my son's silhouette disappear out the window and sighed softly. No, Mrs. Davis, I didn't touch his heart. It was fear that did it. I looked at the morning paper on the table with a small headline. Arthur Miller, the old man who still thinks faster than the young. I smiled. Finally, my son had understood that you can't control the father you deemed too old to compete with. After that conversation, I thought things would calm down, but I had a vague feeling inside. The storm had only temporarily receded. It hadn't dissipated. People like Henry, when their greed isn't satisfied, don't know when to stop. 2 days later, while I was walking in the courtyard with Mrs. Davis, the young nurse ran up, out of breath. "Mr. Miller, is someone looking for you?" "No, they're looking for your documents. They say they're employees from your old company, but they don't have any identification to prove it." I froze. "Where are they?" "In the administration office. They say your son gave them permission." I went there quickly, and sure enough, 2 unknown men were rifling through the file cabinets, including the drawer that held my personal documents. When I walked in, one of them turned and smiled forcibly. "Excuse me, Mr. Miller. We were just looking for some company documents. Mr. Henry said they might be here." I looked at them. My voice turned gravelly. "This is a nursing home, not a company office, and you are trespassing on my personal property." They were silent for a few seconds, and then they left, leaving behind a smell of cigarettes and a cold feeling in the room. I knew it immediately. Henry was desperate. That night, I called Roberts. He listened and just sighed. "I figured he'd do something like this. I've already filed an official notice with the court. Anyone accessing your documents without your direct consent will be violating your personal rights and could be prosecuted. Let me handle this." "So we have to wait?" I asked. "Yes, but you must be careful. Sometimes desperate people don't play by the law. They use dirty tricks." And indeed, the next morning, rumors spread throughout the home. Someone was saying I was senile, that the new will was the product of a manipulated old man. I heard it and just smiled. I was already too familiar with Henry's methods. Instead of apologizing, he was trying to slander. But I didn't react, because I knew that all lies destroy themselves when no one believes them. Mrs. Davis came into my room with the newspaper in her hand. "Look at this, Arthur. He's made it public this time." In the business section, a bold headline: "Henry Miller alleges irregularities in Miller Logistics succession." I put the paper down. I poured myself tea and said calmly, "Good. The more noise he makes, the more attention the court will pay. And when the truth comes out, people will remember who was yelling the loudest." In the afternoon, Robert sent me a brief text message. "Stay calm, Arthur. The court has demanded he present evidence within 10 days. I've already prepared our response. Let him dig his own grave." I put the phone away and leaned back in my chair. A strange feeling washed over me, a mixture of sadness and serenity. Not because I was about to win, but because I was no longer afraid of losing. I looked out the window. The rain was falling softly, just like the morning he abandoned me in this place. But this time was different. I was no longer the abandoned one. I was the one waiting to watch my own son realize the most terrifying thing in life. The truth can't be bought. 10 days later, just as Roberts had predicted, the real storm broke. I was reading a book when he called, his voice calm but unable to hide an obvious satisfaction. "The boy shot himself in the foot, Arthur. He filed a complaint, but he attached copies of the old contracts, the very same documents he forged years ago to seize control of the company." The court noticed immediately. "I just received the notification. The official investigation has begun, and Henry is the first one being investigated." I was silent for a few seconds, listening to the ticking of the clock. No joy, no anger, just a feeling of emptiness that settled in my chest, as if that explosion, though distant, had reached me. "So," he reported himself. "Not exactly, but his arrogance made him careless. I told you, greed doesn't know how to write a complete sentence." I smiled faintly. It had all happened faster than I expected. In the afternoon, a police car pulled up in front of the nursing home. They weren't coming for me, but to deliver a subpoena for a witness. Several curious residents gathered and whispered, "The abandoned father is now a witness against his own son." I heard it all, but I didn't react. The truth itself was already an answer. 3 days later, I was summoned to testify in court. Roberts accompanied me. In the waiting room, I saw Henry, looking gaunt, with a budding beard and a wrinkled shirt. He looked up, his eyes tired. For the first time in many years, there was no arrogance in his gaze. "Dad," he said quietly, his voice choked. "Will you tell them I didn't mean it?" I replied calmly. "I will tell the truth, because I am not a liar, not even to save my own son." He lowered his head. His shoulders trembled. Maybe for the first time in his life, he understood what regret was. The hearing was brief. I just had to confirm which signatures were genuine and which were forged, and recount how I was pressured to sign the old power of attorney. As we left the courthouse, Robert said, "Just a few more days, and the company will be back in your name, while most of Henry's assets will be frozen for the investigation. I know you don't want to see this, but justice is justice." I nodded. "Justice is necessary, Roberts. But sometimes the greatest punishment doesn't come from the law, but from one's own conscience." That evening, Henry appeared unexpectedly at the nursing home. No car, no watch, no secretary. He stood outside the gate, waiting for me. When I came out, he said, "Dad, I'm sorry. I didn't think things would get to this point. I've lost everything." I looked at him for a long time and then just said, "No, you haven't lost everything. You still have the chance to be a decent person. Only if you're brave enough to stop lying." He cried. I remained silent and turned to go back inside. In my heart, there was no hatred left, just a soft sadness. The sadness of a father seeing his son finally reflected in a broken mirror. That night, I wrote in my journal, "My boy has fallen." But it was a necessary fall, because only when you hit rock bottom do you know what is real and what is an illusion. The news of the investigation spread throughout Cleveland in a matter of days. In the business sections, Henry Miller's name appeared next to cold headlines. CEO of Miller Logistics accused of forging power of attorney documents and misappropriating father's assets. Sitting in the nursing home, I read every line as if it were someone else's story. The people at the home looked at me with a mixture of pity and curiosity. Mrs. Davis simply put a hand on my shoulder and said quietly, "Sometimes you don't have to seek justice. It knows when to knock on the door." 3 days later, Roberts came to visit me. He brought the order to freeze Henry's assets, along with a copy of the decision to temporarily transfer the management of the company to an interim board of directors. "Now, Arthur, you don't have to do anything. The law will take care of the rest," he said, placing the stack of papers on the table. I looked at the red stamp and felt a knot in my chest. "Thank you, Roberts. But to be honest, I don't feel happy. I just feel tired," he nodded. "Because you're still a father, and a real father doesn't rejoice at seeing his son fall. But sometimes, the fall is the only thing that can save him." That afternoon, I turned on the television. The screen showed Henry leaving the courthouse, his head down and his face pale. A reporter asked him, "Sir, do you have anything to say about your father's accusations?" He just replied softly, his voice hoarse, "I don't blame my father. I just hope I can see him." I turned off the TV, my heart as heavy as a stone. It had all happened so fast. From the pinnacle of success, in just a few weeks, he had lost everything. The company, the reputation, the friends. I heard that his wife, Lucy, had packed her bags and taken the children to her parents' house. It turns out that money can buy crowds, but it can't hold on to a shallow heart. I didn't sleep that night. The wind blew through the window, bringing the smell of damp earth and the sound of distant bells. I opened the drawer and took out the family photo taken 10 years ago. Me, Isabel, and Henry. 3 people. 3 genuine smiles. "See, Isabel?" I whispered. "The price of greed is more expensive than money." The next morning, Roberts called again. "There's news, Arthur. Henry wants to withdraw the complaint. He admits everything and agrees to return all the shares to you. The court has agreed to suspend the investigation if you confirm that you are not seeking further legal action." I was silent for a long time. "What do you think I should do?" "Do what your conscience tells you." I looked out at the courtyard, where Mrs. Davis was watering the plants. I said slowly, "Forgiveness isn't because he deserves it, but because I no longer want to live in his shadow." I signed the acceptance form, giving my son back his freedom. When Roberts left, I stayed alone in the quiet room. A soft breeze came in, bringing the scent of the roses Mrs. Davis had just planted. I closed my eyes and sighed. Henry had lost everything: honor, money, family. But perhaps in that loss he would begin to see what I had understood a long time ago. No one is truly poor for being without money. One is truly poor when they are without a conscience. 1 week after signing the pardon, I received a thick envelope from Roberts. Inside was an invitation to the inauguration ceremony of the Oakwood Foundation, a charitable foundation for abandoned elderly. My name was listed first on the list of founders. Below, in small print, was Mr. Roberts' signature and a note. This was the wish you and Mrs. Isabel once spoke of. The time has come for it to be realized. I read the letter with trembling hands. Many years ago, Isabel had told me that when I retired, she wanted to open a center to care for homeless seniors. That dream, which I once considered a fantasy, was about to come true. And it was precisely the adversity with my son that made it possible. Sunday morning, I put on my old suit, tied my tie, and went out with Mrs. Davis. When the car arrived, I could hardly believe my eyes. A new building with cream-colored walls and a large sign, the Oakwood Foundation, in honor of dignity. In the lobby, journalists were crowding to take pictures. I heard people whisper, "That's Arthur Miller, the old man who was abandoned by his son." But this time, there was no pity in their voices. It was admiration. Roberts came up and shook my hand. "What do you think? The entire foundation was built with the profits the court returned to you. I just fulfilled what your will said." I looked around. On the wall hung a black and white photo of Isabel, with her kind smile and deep gaze. I whispered softly, "You finally have a home, Isabel. A home for people like me." The ceremony was warm. The reporters asked me for an interview, but I only said a few words. People think revenge is about making others suffer. But in reality, the greatest revenge is to keep living well. I didn't want revenge on my son. I just wanted to transform the pain into something useful. The entire auditorium applauded. Mrs. Davis, sitting in the front row, was wiping away tears. As the ceremony was ending, I saw Henry standing in the doorway. He had lost a lot of weight, his face was gaunt, and he was wearing a simple shirt. No one else seemed to notice him, but I recognized him immediately. He didn't come in. He just stood in the distance, watching me for a long time. In his gaze, there was no longer any anger or arrogance, just emptiness and regret. After the ceremony, I went out and saw him still standing in the same place. We looked at each other in silence for a few seconds. "Dad," he said quietly, his voice trembling. "I don't deserve to be here," I replied. "No, son. It's here that people learn to be worthy." He lowered his head. I put a hand on his shoulder. "I don't hold a grudge anymore. But from now on, live in a way that makes your mother proud, not in a way that forces me to protect myself." He nodded, his eyes red. When he turned to leave, I watched his figure grow smaller in the afternoon sun, and for the first time in many years, my heart no longer felt heavy. I looked up at the sign of the Oakwood Foundation. The wind blew, making the white flag on the roof ripple softly. In the echo of a distant bell, I thought I heard Isabel's voice whispering, "See, Arthur. In the end, the light always finds its way back." 2 months after the foundation's inauguration, my life at Oakwood Senior Living was as peaceful as if a storm had never passed. I still woke up early, read the newspaper, drank my cup of black coffee, and helped Mrs. Davis plant flowers in the courtyard. Every morning, as the sun filtered through the window, I felt my heart as light as the first breath I took after years of carrying the weight of resentment. It was Saturday. The nurse knocked on the door with a brown envelope in her hand. "Mr. Miller, a letter for you. There's no return address." I opened it and immediately recognized Henry's handwriting. Just a few lines. "Dad, I'm about to leave Cleveland. I don't know if you'll ever want to see me again. But if you do, I'll be waiting at the Depot Cafe where you first taught me how to do the books." I read it over and over. So many memories came flooding back. That 8-year-old boy sitting at a wooden table, carefully learning to add and subtract in the ledger. I wasn't sure if I wanted to see him, but I felt an impulse inside me. Maybe a chapter only truly closes when the author dares to write the final period. That afternoon, I took a taxi to the cafe. The depot was still the same. The smell of roasted coffee, the red tile floor, and the wall clock that had been stopped at 6 o'clock for a long time. Henry was sitting in a corner with his back to the door. I recognized my son not by his posture, but by the old jacket I had once given him, the one he had despised for being too old. He stood up nervously when he saw me. No one said anything for a few seconds. I sat down first and motioned to the waiter to bring 2 black coffees. "I hear you're leaving town," I said to break the ice. "Yeah, an old friend offered me a job in Denver. It's a small company, but enough to start over." I nodded. "Good. Maybe we all need a new beginning at some point." Henry remained silent, his hands clasped. "Dad, I don't know whether to thank you or ask for forgiveness anymore. Everything I did was wrong. I lost everything, and only then did I understand how much you had given me." I looked at him, my voice serene. "I don't need your apology, Henry. I just need you to understand that honor isn't in the money. It's in how you face your mistakes." He lowered his head. A tear fell into his coffee cup. "I don't dare ask you to let me come back." I smiled and gently put a hand on his shoulder. "Home isn't where you return to, but where you are still forgiven. As long as you live well, your parents will still be there, in your memories, in your conscience." We sat in silence for a long time, listening to the sound of a train passing outside. As we said goodbye, he hugged me. He said nothing more. He just trembled in silence. I didn't hold him back or stop him. Every person must walk their own path to find themselves again. When his figure disappeared through the door, I stared at the still steaming cup of coffee. Its aroma mixed with the Cleveland afternoon, as soft and sad as a memory. I smiled and said quietly, "It's over, Isabel." Finally, he learned the lesson we always wanted. One morning in early autumn, with a cool breeze and a soft sun, I was sitting in the reading room of the home with a file Roberts had just sent me on the table. On the first page, a title, The Oakwood Foundation, Founder's Annual Report. Below, a list of completed projects, a new nursing home in Akron, nursing scholarships for low-income students, and an outreach program for abandoned seniors. I turned each page, feeling a warmth in my heart. Everything I once lost had been transformed into something more meaningful than money. I knew I had lived long enough to see fate's redemption. At noon, when Mrs. Davis brought me my tea, she said, "A package arrived for you, Mr. Miller, from Denver." I took it and recognized Henry's handwriting. It was a thick envelope, apparently handwritten. I opened it, and inside was a long letter, accompanied by a small photograph of an old auto repair shop. On the back of the photo, a sentence, "Miller's Auto Repair, Honesty and Hard Work." I read the letter. Every word soaked slowly into my soul. "Dad, I managed to open this small shop with 2 friends. I work 12 hours a day, my hands stained with grease, but I feel at peace. For the first time, I'm earning money without being afraid someone will claim it. I remember the afternoons when you taught me to clean every tool, telling me that if you don't keep your tools clean, you'll get your hands dirty. I didn't understand it then, but I understand it now. I don't expect your forgiveness because you already gave it to me with your silence at the cafe. I just want you to know that every dollar I earn today is clean as my desire to start over. Your son, Henry." When I finished reading, I placed the letter gently on the table, feeling my eyes blur. I stood up, opened the window, and let the wind in. In a corner of the courtyard, Mrs. Davis was sitting in the sun, still knitting the same unfinished scarf. She looked up and asked, "Good news?" I smiled. "This time, yes, it's good news." I took Henry's photo and placed it on the table next to Isabel's portrait. 2 faces, one from the past and one from the present, as if looking at each other across time. "See, Isabel," I said quietly. "He's no longer the boy chasing after money. He's learned the lesson it took me a lifetime to teach." At sunset, I wrote a few lines in my old journal on the last page. If someday someone asks me if revenge is worth it, I'll say no. Because forgiveness is the only revenge that only those with a conscience are strong enough to carry out. I closed the journal and looked at the golden sky outside the window. There, between the light and the wind, I thought I heard someone calling my name, soft, familiar, and as serene as the greeting of those who have forgiven each other. Winter came gently, the Cleveland sky as clear as crystal. I had lived at Oakwood Senior Living for almost a year, but now this place was no longer a nursing home. It was my true home. Mrs. Davis had become my dearest friend, and Robert still visited me every month, bringing news from the foundation. I no longer thought about the money, or the company, or what I had lost. Only one thing occupied me, rewriting this story, so that people would know that respect for one's family isn't measured in flowers or luxury cars, but in how one never forgets where they came from. In the afternoon, I went out to the garden. The rose bushes Mrs. Davis had planted were in full bloom. She smiled. "They're beautiful because they're cared for with patience, not with fertilizer," I replied, half joking, half serious. "Just like people, isn't it? When they're no longer loved with patience, they wilt like flowers cut too soon." We sat in silence, watching the reddish sunset. I took Henry's photo out of my pocket. He looked completely different now. A serene gaze, a firm posture, and behind him, the Miller's Auto Repair sign. Below it, he had added a small line, "Dedicated to my father, who taught me that honest work is worth more than gold." I looked at that sentence for a long time. There were no more tears, just a smile. "So, you understand now, Isabel," I said quietly. "It's not the money, but the conscience. That is the true legacy from parents to their children." As night fell, the lights of the home went out early. I went back to my room. I opened my old notebook and wrote one last line. "Henry has found his own light. As for me, I'll just stay here to watch over the dreams of those who still believe in love." I put the pen down and looked out the window. The moonlight fell on Isabel's portrait and Henry's photo, both glowing faintly as if they were smiling together. Inside, I understood. Everything was complete. No anger, no regret. Just peace. The greatest asset that life had finally given back to me.